Hello students, today we will study the topic of circuit optimization. In part 1 of the chapter 2, we studied gate circuits and Boolean equations and Boolean algebra techniques. We also studied standard forms, canonical forms of Boolean expressions. We reviewed different gates, 3 different types of gates: AND gate, OR gate, and NOT gate. Here today we will continue our discussion on circuit optimization. We will first see two-level optimization method, and then we will see map manipulation or so-called Karnaugh map techniques. We'll see with different examples on how we can perform practical optimization and multi-level circuit optimization. Let us ask the following question. What is circuit optimization? Well, we want to optimize, let's say, or minimize the complexity of logic circuits with the goal to obtain simplest implementation for a Boolean function. That's a circuit optimization. We want to obtain simplest implementation for a given function, given Boolean function, to minimize the complexity of a logic circuit, right? We know that any Boolean expression may be optimized or simplified by algebraic manipulation, as we have seen in the previous lecture. We can use Boolean techniques, Boolean algebra techniques, identities, to minimize, to simplify any given Boolean function. We also know that the truth table representation of a function, of a given function, is unique. Right? However, we said that when the function is expressed algebraically, it may take different forms. Right? So depending on how you have simplified, what identities you have used, the algebraic Boolean function can appear in different forms. So to optimize any given Boolean function, we will need to first introduce a cost criterion, which allows us to measure, let's say, simplicity of a circuit, of a logic circuit, right? For example, let's consider the following 3 cost criteria. First one is literal cost, denoted by L. Second one is gate input cost, denoted by G. And third one is gate input cost with NOTs or NOT gates counted. So we denote it as GN. Let's take a look at the following criteria one by one. Here, first criteria is literal cost, right? So first, let's ask, what is literal? What is literal? Well, literal is a variable or its complement in a Boolean expression, right? In a Boolean function. Then the literal cost is simply the number of literal appearances in a Boolean expression that corresponds to the logic circuit diagram. For instance, here in the first example, we have 8 literals for this given Boolean expression. L is equal to 8. We, in this case, simply count the number of literals in a given function. Let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 literals in this function. Therefore, L is equal to 8. All right. What about the second one? How many literals we're going to have? We simply again count 1, 2, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11. So here we have 11 literals. So we call the literal cost is equal to 11. So let me write it down. 1, 1, 11. So in this example, in this third function, how many literals? How can we identify the literal cost, the number of literal appearances? We again count 4, okay, 7, and then 10. So we have 10. Literal cost is equal to 10, right? Because we have 10 literals. So the question of optimization is, again, finding the simplest possible Boolean expression Here, in this specific case, we want to use the literal cost criteria to find the Boolean expression, which is simpler, with less number of literal, right? So which one would be the best? Which solution would be best according to our literal cost criteria? Of course, the first one. Okay, that's one of the objectives for optimization. We want to have a Boolean expression with minimal possible literals. So another question is, can we further minimize this expression using Boolean techniques to even a less number of literal costs? Let's say L is equal to 6 or 5. Possibly yes. Here we have another criteria defined in terms of the gate input cost. This is the second criteria. The gate input cost is the number of inputs to the gates in the implementation, which corresponds to the given equation or equations. Okay? Note that here we may have two different gate input costs. The first one is G, denoted by G, where we don't count the inverters. Well, Gn, gate input cost with NOTs, is another criteria where we count the inverters. For SOP, POS, so sum of products and product of sum equations, it can be found from the equations by finding the sum of, look, all literal appearances first, and then number of terms excluding the single literal terms, G. So all literal appearance plus number of terms excluding the single literals will be G, right? Inverters not counted, gate input cost. And then optionally, the number of distinct complemented single literals will give us Gn cost. Gn, gate input cost with NOTs. If you take a look at this example, it will be clear. For example, for the following function, we can identify G and then Gn. Gate input and then Gn, gate input with NOTs. So these values are not correct. So let's count. So first, all literals. L is equal to 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8. Plus, okay, plus the number of terms. We have 3 terms. First, second, third. 3, okay? So, and then the G will be equal, let's call it the G is equal to 11. 11 in this case. So Gn will be equal to distinct complemented single literals. We will add 11 plus distinct complemented literals are B, A, C, and then D, right? B complement, C complement, D complement will be 3. Then 14. Then G is equal to 11, Gn 14. Similarly, let's take a look at this function quickly. So number of literals here is 11. 11. And number of terms, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, right? So let me write 11 plus 4. So this will give us G15. Now Gn is, we need to count the number of distinct complements. 4 plus number of distinct B, D, and then C, right? Which will be 3, which will give us 18. These two functions are in sum of product form, while here the third function is written in product of sum, POS equation, right? So let's try to get the gate input cost for this. So first we count the number of literals. So number of literals here is equal to 10. 10 plus number of terms excluding the single literal. So number of terms are 1, 2, 3, 4. So 10 plus 4 is 14, which will give us the G, right? Gate input cost. Well, for Gn, we count the number of inverters, distinct inverters. So it will be equal to 17, right? Look, 1, 2, 3. B, we have 2 inverters. So we just count one of them. So it will give us 17. Now the question is, which solution is the best, given 3 representations of same function? So definitely the first one will be the best in terms of the gate input cost, because we have here 11 gate input, 14 gate inputs, inverters counted. If we move on and then see the following example, given the following function, we can provide the circuit diagram as follows, right? And then calculate the cost criteria, GN, literals, number of literals, and then gate input costs. So look, how many GN is equal to G plus 2? So first 5 literals, right? It's clear, 5 literals. And then number of gate inputs will be equal to 7, right? Why 7? Because we are counting only these two terms, 5 plus 1 and 2. Single terms doesn't count, 7. And then for GN, we also count the inverters. Then we get 9. So if you draw these circuit diagram here, logic circuit diagram with AND gates, OR gate, and then inverters with the following symbols shown here for clear visualization. So A, okay, becomes one of the inputs to the OR gate, and then BC, one gate, B, not B, not C, with inverters, another gate. So we can see here that the literals, L, literal count, counts the AND inputs, and then the single literal OR input. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So inputs to the AND gate, literal count. The gate input count adds the remaining OR gate input, the remaining OR gate. So here, two more OR gate input add. Well, GN, the gate input count with NOTs, with inverters, adds 2 more inverters, right, to the count. So we get 9. Now let's consider, let's continue and then see the following example. Example 2. We have function represented as product of sums, POS, product of sums here, and then sum of products, right? 2 forms. It's the same function, F, here, POS, SOP. And then if you just count the number of literals, those cost criteria, L is equal to 6, right? G is 8, GN is 11. Now, if you draw this circuit, okay, it will be like this one. So ABC, 1, 2, 3, okay, 3 gates. We have 3 inverters. And if we take the same function but represent it as a product of sums, and then count the cost criteria such as gate input with NOTs, then definitely product of sums is bigger. So in terms of the cost, L is 6, G is 9, GN at 12. And visually we can see that here we have one more gate, right? One more gate and then more lines required to implement these function using logic diagram. It's a same function node, same little cost. However, if we take into account other costs such as G and GN, the first circuit has better gate input cost and better gate input count with NOTs, and we can select this as our implementation. So again, if you talk about the optimization, in Boolean function optimization, we want to minimize the gate input cost of a Boolean equation, which will reduce the circuit cost, right? We want to optimize Boolean function to reduce the cost of the circuit, right? So we have seen 3 different criteria, and we saw that choosing the gate input cost could be a better criteria for optimization. There are some other techniques as well that allows us to simplify or optimize a Boolean function, such as Boolean algebra techniques. And we also have graphical techniques, okay, which will help us to minimize the cost criteria values. While, note, the truth table representation of any Boolean function is unique, right? That's what we said. However, when we represent it as algebraically, we can use different Boolean algebra techniques to minimize both these kind of cost of input cost, right, to reduce the circuit eventual cost. And the function, when we use Boolean algebra techniques, may appear in many different forms. As we know that any Boolean expression may be simplified by algebraic manipulation, as we have seen in the previous lecture. So eventually reducing the GN, G, and literal costs. There are, however, some questions. When, for instance, when do we stop trying to reduce the cost using Boolean, let's say, techniques, Boolean algebra? Do we know when we have the minimum cost in terms of literal or gate input costs? Note that procedure of optimization or simplification of a Boolean expression is a little bit awkward because we lack the exact rules or specific rules to predict each succeeding step in the manipulative process. Also, it is, in addition, difficult to determine whether the simplest expression has been achieved using Boolean algebra techniques. To address those kind of those questions, we will introduce a graphical technique called Karnaugh maps. In short, they're called K-maps. Let's take a look at the details of this technique. Before moving into the examples, let me provide some details of what K-map is, or Karnaugh maps. K-map is a collection of squares, as we will see shortly, where each square represents mean term. So mean term will be one of the key terms that we'll be using in constructing K-map. And the collection of squares is actually the graphical representation of a Boolean function. Another characteristic of K-map is that adjacent squares differ in the value of one variable. We will see it. Alternative algebraic expressions for the same function are derived by recognizing patterns of squares in graphical representation. Also, we can view the K-map as reorganized version of the truth table. Remember this. So truth table reorganized to obtain the K-map. Okay? Truth table, we know, contains all the mean terms, right? All possible input-output combinations for a given function. So K-map also provides all input-output possible combinations and can be considered as a reorganized truth table. Or we can view K-map as topologically warped Venn diagram, as used to visualize sets in algebra of sets. We will see this in picture. So K-map is used to find optimum or near optimum expression for sum of products and product of some standard forms. Finding the optimum, right? And also for two-level and or and circuit implementation. Also note that for functions with small number of variables, and also visualizing the concepts related to manipulating Boolean expression, and also demonstrating concepts used by CAD, computer-aided design programs, to simplify large circuits. So K-map is a graphical technique that allows us to optimize the circuit, find the optimum, near optimum. Here we have the K-map, Karnaugh map, for two-variable Boolean expression. The squares will contain the mean terms. And then the variables of our Boolean expression are located here as x when it's 0, x when it's 1, y 0, y 1. So m0 represents when two variables are 0, 0, right? That's why it's complement, x complement, y complement. m1 is the first mean term, right? x0, so it's complement. y1, it's not complemented. m2, y0, it's complemented. X is not 0. y1, x1 will give us third mean term, x and then y. Look, these are the indexes, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And these are the also function outputs for all possible combination of input values. So adjacency, note that the mean term 0, m0, and mean term m are adjacent and differ in the value of variable y. Similarly, the mean term 0 and then mean term 2 differ in the variable of x. And also we have m0, m1 and m3, which differ in the x variable as well, right? So x is different here. And finally m2 and then m3 in the value of y. So all of these adjacent squares or cells differ in one variable in Karnaugh map. We said that K-map is a reorganized truth table. Right? So let's take a look at these two variable function where we have, this is a truth table, right? Truth table for two variable function, f of x and y. So all possible input combinations, input values for x and y, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. And output function, right? A, B, C, D. So if we rearrange this truth table, we can show it as a K-map, Karnaugh map. So A, B, C, D. A, B, C, D. So function outputs are located as a square here for all possible input value combinations. Y, X, 0, Y, 0, X, 0, Y, 0, A, right? A. X, 0, Y, 1, X, 0, and then Y, 1 will give us B. 1, 0, 1, and then 0, C, and then 1, 1, D. So it has direct relationship to the truth table, the K-map, the Karnaugh map. Now let's take a look at the following example, following function, and then how we can present it using K-map. Well, f of x and y is equal to x. We can draw the truth table easily, right? X, y, and then f output. 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. Then f of xy is x whenever x is true. 0, 0, 1, 1. Right. So if we convert it to to the K-map, our x will be here, right? And then y will be here, and then function of the value will be here, right? As a output of this function, 0, 0, 1, 1. When x and y is 0, x and y is 0, it's 0, x 0, y 1 is 0. When x is true, the output of the function will be true. By true, I mean 1, right? High, or 1, 1, 1. So if you take a look at this function, and then two adjacent cells containing 1s, we can combine them, these two adjacent cells, using the minimization theorem. We said these are also can be represented as minterms, right? So this will be the first term, and then the second term of our function. This is the minimization theorem that we use. X, right, can be taken out, y or y. This is equal to 1, right? So then we are left with x. However, also we see interesting property. So this is 1, 0, right? X is 1, y is 0, and then it's 1, 1. So 1, x is 1, y is 1. Now let's take a look at this example. This function, g of xy is equal to x or y. Right, so we can write down truth table. Let me quickly write xy and then g. Then we see that when x and then y is 0, it is 0. In all other cases, it's 1, right? Because if one of these two variables is true or 1, then the output will be 1. So also look, these are minterms, right? We can write down this function in a canonical form by collecting those minterms. For example, let me first write down the minterms. We said this is the minterm 0, minterm 1, minterm 2, and then minterm 3. So now we can write these functions down in a canonical forms by collecting those minterms where we have 1s, right, high or true values. Then g of x and y will be equal to, first one, x 0, y 1. Then we will complement x, y will not be complement. Now we're working with sum of products form, right? Okay, and then m2, minterm, second minterm, x, y not, and minterm 3, then, or x and y. So we can apply some simplification and prove that these three terms is equal to x or y. For that we can simply do this, x, we take x out, y not or y, and then this will give us x and y and x. Well, we know from the Boolean identity not x and y, or x is equal to x or y. All right, so what we did it first, we wrote down this function using K-map cells in a canonical sum of products, right? And then we did simplification, and we have now the following. We can also use adjacent pairs to, adjacent cells, okay, these are cells containing 1s, and combine them using the minimization theorem. So if we combine them, we will get the following. First, we combine these two adjacent cells, and then second, we combine these two adjacent cells. Here, the first term will be equal to x using the minimization theory, and then second term will be equal to y, right? X or y. Three variable k-maps can be constructed as follows. For instance, here we have x and yz variables, and then we can construct the following k-map cells. Here, the first cell will be the location of the first minterm at index 0, second m1, second minterm, and then third minterm. Notice here we are putting third minterm so that the adjacent cell have only one bit change difference. And then here m2, m4, m5, m6, and then m7. So again, this can be interpreted as a rearranged truth table where we have 0, 0, 0, the location of the function m0. X is 0, and then y is 0, z is 1, m1, right? X 0, y z 1, 1, m3, etc. And also, look, each term in the cell corresponds to the product terms, right? Product terms of our SOP, sum of product, canonical form. So 0, 0, 0, we complement x, y, z, right? 0, 0, 0. And then here, x0 complement y0, z is 1, uncomplement, not complement. And other entries as well. So in this case, we have x1, y1, z1, then we will not complement all these variables, none of these variables. Look, the minterms are adjacent on the k-map if the binary values for an index differs in one bit position. For example, this cell and adjacent to this cell. And there is only one bit change, right? 0, 0, 0, 1. And if you compare this m1 to m3, let's say there is also one bit change. So 0 changed to 1, right? And also, if you compare m3 to m2, one bit changes. Okay, if you put m2 instead of m3 and m3 here, then we will observe 2 bits changing. That's why in k-map we need to place all those locations of minterms such that there is one bit change between adjacent cells. We have alternative map labeling. First, note that k-map used largely involves entering values into the map and reading of the product terms from the map. So entering the values of the minterms, right, where they are true, and also reading of the product terms. So alternative labeling are useful because we don't have to write all these details of 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, for instance, and provide this kind of a compact labeling. Well, look, this is what we have seen, x, y, z, k-map for 3 variables, where all the possible combination of these variables are listed. Okay, but if you note, we can differentiate, like x1, always true, we can just indicate it as follows. And when y is true, y true, y true. And also z, when the z is true, z true, true, right? So again, this is the region where x is true, and this is where the z is true. Therefore, we have the following region. And y is true here. Therefore, we have that. So instead of writing all these 0, 0, 0, 1, we can have the following labeling, where we just indicate the x, z, and then y, the values where it is high or true or 1. And then 0 regions will be indicated by complemented x, complement y, complement z, complement, and not z complement, right? So this is another way of labeling the k-maps, which saves us space, let's say, and then a bit more convenient. For instance, here, these are the examples of the k-maps using alternative labeling that we just discussed. So let's discuss this. By convention, we represent the minterms of a Boolean function by 1 in the map. For example, these locations. So for instance, if we have the following function represented as a sum of minterms, product terms, right, at these index locations, 2, 3, 4, 5, then we just indicate them as 1, as we write down as 1. So first is second M2, midterm, third midterm, fourth midterm, and fifth midterm. You will see some, in some other cases, zeros are written here to indicate those missing midterms. Now look, in alternative labeling, again, we show only the x where it is true. For example, here, 1, right? X complement, we didn't write it, but we should get used to it, 0. And we have y is 1, 1 in this region, and then z is 1, 1, and 0, 0, for example, right? And then those values, z complement, y complement. Here we have another function, g, of 3 variables defined by a, b, c. Again, represented as a sum of product terms, mean terms, right? In a compact way. We have 4 terms here as well. And what we do in K-map, we indicate those locations by 1. I also refer it to high or true, right? 3, midterm 3, midterm 4, midterm 6, and then midterm 7. So you need to get used to the locations of these 8 indices, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Here, x most significant and z is a least significant on map boundaries we can find. Now we have some ideas on how we can construct K-maps from truth tables, and each cell of the K-map represents the midterms locations of the function, right? Now, remember that we wanted to minimize or optimize a Boolean expression, right? In terms of, let's say, literal cost, gate input cost. Right? Now, K-map, we said, is the graphical way of obtaining the near optimum expression, Boolean expression, with a minimal cost. So let's see. On a 3 K-map variable, on a 3 variable K-map, if we represent just 1 square, then it will be a midterm with 3 variables, right? If we consider 2 adjacent squares, then it will represent a product term with 2 variables, right? Here 3, here 2. Well, if we combine 4 adjacent terms, okay, then we will obtain a product term with 1 variable. We will also see that if 8 adjacent terms is a function of all ones, if our 3 variable K-map contains ones in every cell, then it will be equal to 1. So simplest constant function. So in K-map, by combining these squares or cells, we can reduce the other 2 cost criteria, such as input cost, or cost input. As well as we reduce the number of literals in a product term, which will reduce the literal cost. Let's see some examples. For example, let our function, Boolean function, be represented as sum of product terms, sum of min terms, represented by the following 4 terms: midterm 2, 3, 6, and 1. In K-map, we represent those locations by 1, right? So 2, 3, 6, and then 7. Look, we can write down the canonical form, right, from this table as follows. So x naught, right, y, and then z. X naught, y, and then z. So y true, z true, x is 0. X, y, z, right? So second, x, y, and then z. Well, here we have 7. Midterm indexed by 7. This one, x naught, y, and then z naught. This term, right? Second term. And then we can write down this as x, y, but z is complemented here, right? So z complemented in this region, x complemented, y complemented. So if we apply minimization theorem twice or 3 times here, right? Then we can simplify 4 terms into 2, and from these we obtain a single y variable. So if we have the function represented by the following adjacent minterms, 4 minterms, right? Then we'll have only a single term, y. The function is represented by y. So K-map allows us to visually identify, visually simplify. So the role of K-map in these cases, in 3-variable map, will reduce the literal product terms for SOP, standard forms. Okay, that correspond to rectangulars on K-map, containing cell counts at a powers of 2. Right, so rectangles of 2 cell represent 2 adjacent minterms. Rectangles of 4 cell represent 4 minterms that form a pairwise adjacent ring. And rectangulars can contain non-adjacent cells as illustrated by the pairwise adjacent ring above. Topological warps of 3-variable K-map will show all adjacencies. For example, in Venn diagram representation of 3-variable K-map shown here, we have 0, 4, okay, they are adjacent cells, 0 to 4, 0 to 2, and then 0 to 1, right? And we also have 6 to 7, 7 to 5, 7 to 3. They are all adjacent cells. In cylindric form, we see that 2 and 0 is adjacent. Those are the location of minterms. And 4 and then 6 are also adjacent. Those are called adjacent cells. Here we have example shapes of 2-cell rectangulars defining the adjacent cells. So 3, 7. Okay, 2 and then 0. 2 and then 0. And then these 2 cell defines 0 and then 1, the grouping. Right? Each grouping reads of a product term for these rectangles. Here we have example shapes of 4-cell rectangles. We are grouping 4 cells, 4 rectangles, right? 2, 6, 0, and 4 are adjacent, right? So we are grouping these 2. And then another 4 is defined by the following 2. We will see shortly that these identifying the adjacent cells and grouping allows us to minimize the Boolean expression in terms of the literal cost, gate input costs. As I said, K-maps can be used to simplify Boolean functions by systematic methods. Here we collect the terms that are defined by ones in the map. If we take this function as an example, function of 3 variables identified by the following standard form sum of product, right? Defined by these indices of minterms 1, 2, 3, 5, 7. First, we just write down all the location of ones at these locations, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 1, right? So 5 minterms. Then we start grouping. So we can define, we said that if we group 4 adjacent cells, and it will result into 1 literal single variable, right? So this will be z. And then if you group 2 adjacent cells, then we will obtain 2 literal, 2 variable. So how did we obtain the following function? By grouping, right? So look, in order to visually optimize or eliminate some of the variables, we should look at the pattern here, the pattern of the variable that changed. So if you look at these two minterms being grouped, 1, 1, here we have x naught, okay, x complement, and then y. Y is 1 in both cases, right? Y, y. And in order to find which variable or term will be eliminated, we need to look at the pattern changing here. Z, for this case, changed from 1 to 0, right? If z variable changes, then it will get eliminated. Well, in grouping of the 4 cases, 4 ones, we see that the only variable that doesn't change is z. It remains 1, 1. While y changes from 0 to 1, and x changes from 1 to 0, right? So x and y goes off, gets eliminated, we are left with z. So you just need to take a look at the pattern of those binary numbers changing at that specific grouping. So if you just group a single cell in single element, then, for example, this one, right? Then we can write that term, product term, as follows. So x naught, y, and then z naught, right? If we just circle this one. As follows. If we just circle this, and then we want to write down the term for this, then it will be x naught, y, right? And then z naught. So if you just group one cell, then we will have three variables. If you group two, then we'll have two literals, two variables. If you group four, then we have one variable. If you group, let's say, all ones, then our function will be equal to 1. Now let's take a look at the following example. We are given the following function, defined by 6 midterms, right? Product terms, sum of product terms. Our task is to use K-map to find the near optimum sum of products. So first let's draw the K-map for 3 variables. All right. Here we have eight cells in total. Okay, and then let's define our x, z. This is not complement here. X complement is here. And then we have y, right? And then z. In this region, z is high, and z complement. Let me just write down all this for completeness. Right? And also I can write down probably the following 0 and 1s, 0, 1, right? And then we have 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, those values. And also, let me write down the location of minterms. This is 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 7, right? All these 0. Now I need to insert 1s at this location, 0. M0 here, 1. First, another 1. Second, here, 1. Fourth, midterm, here, 6. Here, and then 7. So we have the following, right? Location of midterms. Let me just highlight it. Now, we need to apply K-map tools, techniques, to simplify this sum of products, right? So we said we need to try to find the grouping of 2 to the power of n, right? Where n could be 1, 2, 3. We need to try to find the pattern of 1's adjacent cells, either, for example, 2 or 4. So look, one way to group is the following 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? These are adjacent cells. That is 1. And then another one is these two, 2. Another one is this one. So I can denote this as A, term B, and this group as C. Then F is equal to A or B or C. So now I need to write down this A, right? A, this group of 4. We need to find one of the 3 variables that doesn't change. Let me erase, clean out. Okay, so we start only from the first grouping. All right, now first we set this grouping of 4 adjacent. We set that to be A, right? So look, we need to find the variables that changes or that doesn't change in this group. For instance, we see that x changes from 0 to 1 in this group. Y also changes from 0 to 1, right? Only z doesn't change, in particular z naught. Z naught, also here we have z naught, right? So if we have the following case, then a term will be equal to z complemented, right? X and then Y gets eliminated. Second, B term, right? So B grouping, right? I think here we are missing 1, and then 7 also 1. So let's call this group as B group. So this grouping is B. Okay. Now, if you want to find here the pattern, the variables that change to eliminate, we can see, okay, Y, okay, doesn't change, and also X doesn't change, right? X doesn't change, Y doesn't change, but Z changes from, okay, Z to Z naught. In this case, we'll have X and Y left. Or, and then let's call this one the last term, C. Right? In C, we see that what variable change? Z changes from complemented to uncomplemented. So we are left with X complement and then Y complement. Y complement, right? So using the Karnaugh map tool, we derived the following optimum sum of products. Okay, optimum sum of products term by simply grouping. Our goal here, when we use Karnaugh map, to find the largest grouping of ones. Here, largest was 4, right? If we maximize the grouping, then we minimize the littles. The 4 group of ones resulted in 1 literal, and then 2 groups of 1 resulted in 2 littles, right? So here, why we care about K-map. K-map gives us the near optimum solution for some products by just using this grouping tool. Well, imagine that if you want to represent this function of x, z in canonical sum of products form, then we need to write down all these, right? For example, at 0, we have x naught, y naught, z naught, or we'll have 6 terms, right? In 1, we have x naught, right, y naught, and then z. Well, and then second, there we'll have x naught, y, and then z naught. Then we will write down the fourth midterm. Then x, y naught, and then z naught. Okay, and then 6th one, here will be x, y, and then z naught, and finally the 7th term will be x, okay, x, y, and then z. So now the question is, given the following function, right, the following function represented in canonical sum of products, if you want to minimize or optimize this function in terms of cost, those input cost or literal cost, you may apply Boolean algebra techniques to minimize, and one may end up with different solutions. However, Karnaugh map allows us to find the optimum, right, very easily without applying Boolean algebra techniques. Well, we can check later this representation of our function is equivalent to the following. This is the optimized, let's say, optimum or best possible solution in terms of the gate cost. K-map comes very useful and handy.